Sure shot, baby.
So, good day, everyone. We're here for another episode of the DVD show. So, for today, we have one of the most prominent anchors and analysts here in the Philippines during the time before he left to go to the US. But now he's working also in the North America for ABS-CBN. So,
Mhm.
I forgot what you call your job, but then yeah,
News Bureau
you're
Chief. It's a fancy name, News Bureau Chief.
News Bureau Chief as
Yep.
in the ABS-CBN in North America.
Mhm.
And I'll now welcome here to the DVD show TJ Manotoc. Thank you for
Right.
joining me here on my podcast.
Hey, Diego, thanks for having me. You're so lucky you have those initials. That's why you can call it the DVD show. Because if you were Diego de Jos without the V,
Yeah.
so you wouldn't have the DVD.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. My friend was the one who suggested it and I said,
Hey,
"Oh, sure, why not? It's like unique and it stands
you
out."
got it.
So go ahead, right?
There you
So
go.
to start things off, I'd want to ask, how have you been doing? I mean, in the US, there are a lot of cases. I mean, I watch the NBA now, and almost all the players
I know,
are in
right?
health and safety protocols. So, and the Omicron has been ravaging the whole country. So,
Mhm.
how have you been doing, and all your friends, maybe, and family there?
Yep. I'm good. I mean, you do hear more and more people getting sick, getting COVID. Thankfully, I don't know anybody who got it severely. I know a bunch of people who had mild cases and got over it pretty quickly. As you mentioned, the NBA, there's just so many players getting into the health and safety protocols, which we don't really
Mm-hmm,
know if they're actually positive or they were just exposed to someone positive. But nonetheless,
mm-hmm,
it's the staggering numbers, and I'm honestly worried that they might cancel this or at least pause the season for a while because that's something I think the the NHL did
mm-hmm,
for hockey because just not just enough players for some of the teams.
mm-hmm,
So, but hopefully we get to ride this wave of Omicron out of the winter season because in the last 2 years, winter is really when it picked up anyways, when people were home indoors, gatherings, parties, and it's gonna get worse for a few more weeks for sure because people are just about to go home from their winter holidays. But I'm just hopeful that it's as they say, it's not as severe illness that was caused by the Delta variant, even though most of the cases are Omicron. So we're hanging in there. We're hanging in there. Laban lang, as they say in sports, laban lang. So far so good. Thankful and grateful to be healthy and okay, at least in my circle. So far.
yeah. And people know that you aren't here anymore in the Philippines because you're in the US
Mhm.
working for ABS-CBN as the North American bureau chief. So how would you describe like the job you do for the people that aren't aware of what you do there?
Well, obviously, it's different from what I used to do before. Before I was a hybrid of news anchor, news reporter, sports host, and sportscaster. There was a bunch of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I did within given a span of 1 week. But now I sit more behind the scenes. We manage a small news team here in the States in terms of the news gathering that we do in the areas where there's heavy Filipino population. So the West Coast, the East Coast, some parts like in Nevada as well, and then up north in Canada, which we cover. We try to cover all that. And I cover the bigger stories as well, things that really have an impact to Filipinos here and Filipinos back home. If those news are relative and important to them as well. So that I mean, so it's a mix of still being a reporter once in a while, still being on cam once in a while, but more behind the scenes managing a team now as compared to before. So I like to joke about it. I've gone into the mature roles. Hindi na ako pang, hindi na ako pang teeny bopper lang. So yeah, it's a lot more responsibility than before. But I'm up for the challenge, and it's been a pretty fast 3 years has gone by since I moved out here in 2018 and so far continuing to grow and evolve in this new role.
Is your role there like long term? Like you plan to stay there for the foreseeable future?
That is the goal. I mean, there's no fixed term for a bureau chief. I mean, although the last two iterations of bureau chiefs had about I think a 2 or 3 year run, but they went home for personal reasons. But ideally, because the one before them was our current boss now, Jing Reyes, and she was here for
Mm-hmm.
2 years. So, and she was actually the first ever, North America bureau chief. So back then, the goal was to find somebody to replace her who'd be willing to stay here, long term. So that's pretty much where we're headed. So far so good, and we'll see how long it can work out.
Okay, so how about when you said that other bureau chiefs went home due to personal reasons? So for you, what was the decision making process like? I mean, it's a tough move to go from the Philippines to the United States, and then you said it's also a whole different job. So how was
Yeah.
it like for you? Like, how long did you decide? What was the process like?
Funny enough, it was actually a pretty easy decision, primarily because it was triggered by my desire to do something different.
Oh, okay.
In 2018, for those who were aware, I beyond my work with ABS News and ABS Sports, I did a bit of a personal advocacy on mental health. I
Mm-hmm.
came up with a video and basically an advocacy campaign on mental wellness. I told my story about surviving anxiety and depression as a teenager. And shortly after that, it just hit me that I was like, okay, here it was. My snapshot of my day was I was doing an early morning show on ANC, which was like at 6 a.m. And then I do my daily routine of whether do a news report, or maybe anchor a UAP game. Then in the evening, I had a sports show called The Score on
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sports in Action. So really did out of heavy bookend work of the day, and I was averaging about 4 to 5 hours of sleep every day for a pretty good stretch of about 2 years. And at that point in 2018, this is about early 2018, I was feeling a bit of the burnout. Plus, I was telling myself, teka lang, here I am advocating for health and wellness, and this is not the healthiest thing to do, to really, run yourself to the ground. So I spoke to my bosses and I said, is there something else I can do? Because this is what I'm feeling right now, and da da da. And then maybe should I drop the morning show? Should I let go of the evening show? Whatever. And then one of my bosses said, well, that position of bureau chief in San Francisco is still open. Like, okay, that's a stretch. From can I do something different? But fast forward, they said, hey, because we actually discussed it a year before that, if that's something I would be open to look into, and then we talked about it, but nothing was firm. So I'm like, okay, I'll give it some thought and talk about it with my wife. And at that time, a lot of family was here already in 2018. My stepson was here. My mother-in-law just migrated. My dad was here with my half brother who was going to college here, and they were here like 8 months in a year. My sister was here in and out because my nephew was going to school here. So I
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of family literally in San Francisco, and I was like, it
Mm-hmm.
was like a no-brainer to just take the chance and go for this, adventure in our chapter in our lives. It's not like I was going to be sent into the middle of, Arkansas or something that there's no Filipinos and no family nearby. So it was like, okay, let's give this a go. It wasn't a tough choice. My kids were supportive of it. I mean, it's not, something I'd want to do just to uproot them if it's something they didn't want to do, but they had a nice, fun vacation in the States the last 2 years prior to that, and they were like, "Hey, what if we get to leave?" I'm like, "Guys, it's not that simple." And then all of a sudden, that opportunity came up, and as a journalist, you're allowed to bring your family as well. So it happened so quickly, and in a span of a few months, I was here. So I think when I covered the NBA Finals in June, just went home, packed my bag shortly after that, and was back here in July, and that was it. That's how it started.
Okay, I didn't know that was the process of you going there. I got kind of surprised that you weren't calling the games anymore because
Mhm.
I watch almost all the UAP games, so I hear you calling a lot of games every
I was
season.
able to go home for a while. I showed up a bit for, I think, the semifinals.
Yeah, yeah.
Or because I had to go home in November to fix some paperwork, and the production team back there like, well, you're here, upo ka na lang. I'm
Mm,
like, okay,
yeah.
I did 2 or 3 games, and I think I did a couple of one like final four 2 games, and I think maybe I did game one of the finals. I think it was like a pre-game special I did, so it was fun. It was a fun send off for me that I was able to do, be part of the UAP to end it all.
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned nga na tagal mo na nga nagko-call ng UAP games
Mhm.
and reporting news here in the Philippines. So, is there ever a moment when you're there in the span of 3 years that you miss calling the games here for ABS-CBN Sports?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I still watched the games here. I would make Puyat to watch the first game because the time difference was really difficult. And if you wanted to watch it live, you'd really be waking up. I mean, staying up really late.
Mm-hmm.
So I enjoyed still watching the games, keeping up the tabs with it with TFC. It airs in TFC. So yeah, I really really miss just being part of it. The atmosphere of being around the UAP is just it's just priceless. It's something that I can't say that any other league can really copy or have. It's so unique the way that you have at any given time four different schools, four different fan bases in one venue, and you just have that kind of love for the teams. That's just phenomenal. So I really miss it a lot. And I was like, okay, now that I'm out of it as a sportscaster, eventually when I go home, I'll be able to visit and really enjoy it as a fan.
Mm-hmm.
As one of those guys, just for the audience and really enjoying it. So that's something I look forward to going home when this pandemic is over and when live sports are back.
Yeah. You also mentioned that it's really great that you've been covering a long time already, and your knowledge and your brilliance in terms of all these basketball and volleyball and all the other sports that you need to cover, like football. I'm not sure what other sports you're tasked to cover over the course of your career. And I'm curious to know about like where did that passion stem from? I mean, a lot of people say that you're very passionate with sports and you're willing to do it in a long period of time. So
Mhm.
can you please talk about like your like upbringing or childhood and how you fell in love with sports and how you pursued hosting and broadcasting?
Okay. Well, we're really a sporty family, so sports is in the blood of the Manotoc family. If you dig
Mm-hmm.
back in the archives, actually of Lasal, if you look at the Manotoc brothers, my dad and his siblings, they pretty much played all the sports from soccer to basketball. My dad had all these medals in my lola's house. Like, dad, you played ping pong, you played tennis, you played volleyball. But back
Mm-hmm.
then, there's like it's a small school population, so anybody who's kind of athletic kind of played all the sports. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, they really the Manotoc brothers kind of excelled in basketball. So my older titos were much better than my dad, Tito Billy, then Dini, and then my dad. So and then none of them play. I mean, there was no PBA at the time, but my Tito Billy I heard was really good, and he played in the national team. He would have made the PBA if there was a PBA. My
Mm-hmm.
dad naman, he played 2 years in college and then focused on golf, and he was much better as a golfer than a basketball player. But he found himself as a PBA coach in the late
Mm-hmm.
70s and pursued that and did very well, won a couple of championships, won a Grand Slam. And that was the exposure at the sports with my dad. And so, growing up, I loved playing basketball. I played soccer first as well. So soccer, football was my first love, and then eventually basketball. I took that seriously. Became varsity in Ateneo High School. Then LaSalle for college. I was in Team B. So it was just something that was just something I really truly loved to do to play basketball. As a high schooler in college, and then graduating college. While I was in my last year in college, I was invited by my former teammate in LaSalle, Luigi Trillo, to
Oh,
join him
okay.
on the coaching staff of Southridge, and he was coaching in Southridge, and for Marley for a couple of reasons. One, he needed the help. Two, he knew I would do it for free because he had no additional budget for a coaching for a coach. And three, I literally lived across the street from Southridge back at that time. I lived in Alabang Hills, so it was something
Oh,
he
okay.
could do for free. So hey, sure, I'm down. So that gave me the first taste of coaching. People would have thought that it was because of my dad. No, actually, it was my friend Luigi, which is kind of funny because our dads were teammates in LaSalle during their time. So
Mm-hmm.
Wacky Three and Dad were teammates, and Luigi and I were teammates in LaSalle when there was a time when Team B had a merger of Team A. So we were teammates and became good friends. So that started my exposure to coaching. And then shortly after that, when we were graduated already, I moved on to coach in LaSalle Green Hills. That was my first job actually, and I was enjoying it a lot. But then I wanted to be more independent as well. And coaching back then in high school was really not the most lucrative thing. It was really it was a part time job. So I was thinking to myself, I needed something more financially stable if I want to keep coaching, but I wanted something
Mm-hmm.
part time. I was looking around and I saw some of my friends, Luigi, and then even Jude Torquato was my friend at the time. They were already doing sportscasting
Mm-hmm.
for the UAP and the NBA, and
Yeah.
even his girlfriend at the time, Ria Trillo. was a courtside reporter for the NBA, and I had a cousin, Vanessa Mayuga, who was a courtside reporter for the PBL, which is under the Vintage production. So I'm like, hey, if they can do it, maybe I can do that too.
Yeah.
I literally asked for help to send in applications. I sent it to ABS-CBN Sports and to Vintage, who was handling the PBL. Um, at the time, Vintage was still merging with Viva, so for a while they were
Mm-hmm.
Viva Vintage. It was a bit of a mess, so they actually kind of ignored my application. But when I went to ABS Sports, they're like, "Oh, hey, you're the son of Tommy Manotoc. You're a varsity player as well, and you're already a coach. And fine, let's try you out as a sports reporter." So I actually started my career with ABS-CBN Sports. Few people are aware of that because I made my mark really first in the PBA in the early 2000s. And
Mm-hmm.
so I did a few games in the NBA. And then after a few games, I get a call from the late Ronnie Nathaniels, who was heading production for the PBA under Viva Vintage. And he goes, "Hey, why didn't you apply straight to me? Da, 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 whatever." Long story short, I was immediately pirated to go
Yeah.
to the PBA because they offered me to be an analyst at the age of
Mm-hmm.
23. So can you imagine me and actually Paolo Trillo, the brother of
Mm-hmm.
Luigi, who eventually became well known as the manager at Ateneo and now Meralco. We were the two young guys who were given the chance because Red Bull was a new team at the time. This is the season of the PBA year 2000. And Red
Mm-hmm.
Bull took on Yang Yao was their coach and Andy Howe was their assistant team manager. But they
Mm-hmm.
used to be two regular analysts in the rotation for Vintage. So there were two openings, which is extremely rare. And boss Vic De Rosario, being the showbiz, icon that he is, he told Ronnie Nathaniels, "Hey, get me young, good-looking guys. I want to experiment with young blood." So we kind of fit that mold. So like, okay, so they gave us a shot, and luckily enough, we were good enough. We worked hard at the craft, and we learned it. And we were the youngest. I think we were the youngest to this day. We were the youngest analysts on the PBA. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
started it. And then, years down the line, I got an offer to move back to ABS-CBN, to do more things with news and sports and all that. And I found myself back in the UAP in year 2004. So from then on, the rest is history. And then I had a really, incredible run. I'm so grateful for it from '04 to 2018, 14 straight years doing the UAP and then eventually doing other things like NBA, ASCALs, Southeast Asian games. I even dabbled in baseball and billiards as well with ABC Even Sports. So, almost pretty much all the sports I tried except boxing. I never touched boxing as a commentator. I wanted to stay
Oh.
away from what I didn't know what I could do.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So, but it was just a joy to look back in that sports casting career and how I was able to kind of will my way in it because it's something I love to do. It was and
Mm-hmm.
really it was when you're sitting there by courtside, you tell yourself, this is a paid job. Seriously, I'm getting paid to do this, to sit here and watch this game and talk about it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it's just a dream come true.
Yeah. I didn't know you were a coach in Southridge. It's because I studied there also for high
Oh
school. But
wow.
then, yeah.
Marco Benitez, if you remember Marco
Yeah.
Benitez, he should be if I, take a guess, he
Yeah.
should be the most famous alumni who made it, you
Yeah.
know, the best in college. He
Yeah,
was
he
a
is.
player. When he was a senior, I was part of Luigi's coaching staff at the time. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Marco Benitez's batch when I was coaching there, and then funny enough, he ends up working with me in ABS Even Sports as as an
Yeah.
analyst as well, right? So I kind
Yeah.
of felt so old, like I'm next to my former player who actually grew bald faster than me, and then now I really feel old.
Yeah. Yeah, Southridge didn't reach that the pinnacle of their prime anymore. Like we're not good anymore before I graduated. Like even
Oh
now I'm
man,
not there anymore. We don't win anymore any games. Before kasi nananalo naman eh. Like
so they
even when it
dissolved
was
the
my
basketball team.
yeah, our
What?
basketball team's not that good anymore
Okay. Oh,
compared
but I
to
mean, they still have a basketball team.
now. I'm not sure when when it was
Oh,
the pandemic because
okay.
the
Yeah, yeah.
players graduated also. So I'm not sure if they were able to formulate one.
Right, right. But they were always, and I'm sure they're still always good in soccer. They had a really good
Yeah,
football
soccer,
team.
baseball.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there.
Pretty good at that
Yep.
at that sport pa din. Pero the thing that stood out to me from your story was you like took advantage of the opportunity. Like you weren't sure that you were gonna have that opening to coach, and
Mhm.
you weren't sure also if you're gonna have that opportunity to cover games. Then it was when it was there, you just tried it out, then you ended up being successful. So through that journey that you had, how would you emphasize like the importance of staying ready? Like I listen to a lot of podcasts and the players that guests, that's what they say, like pag bangku sila and then
Mhm.
pag ready sila, biglang 1 or 2 games na may chance, biglang consistent na napalala rin sila. And then over the course of their career, they're able to have a successful one already. So
Mhm.
how would you emphasize that in your early juncture of your broadcasting career?
Well, as a sportscaster, whether you're an analyst or play by play, you just kind of want to absorb as much as you can about that particular league you're covering, so that you're not. This is my personal thing. I never was reliant on notes. I wanted to be more
Mm-hmm.
reliant on stock knowledge of what I knew of this player, of this coaching style, of this team. But that entails a lot of just watching and meeting them and talking to them, right? So, iba-ibang diskarte. There are other, analysts or play-by-play guys who love to have notes during the game that, they'll when they're talking about this player, they'll dig up a nice factoid of his history. Oh, he
Mm-hmm.
grew up in, Iloilo, and he was coached by this coach in Iloilo. And that's pretty
Mm-hmm.
that's cool and all that. And that's just not my personal style. I like to really uh, know them from their style of play and the way they approach the game. And I prefer to analyze what I see more than trying to bring all this, research from the back of my
Mm-hmm.
head. I want to see what I see and I'll react to it and say, hey, that's a great play. But you know what? What made that happen was a screen before that pass and all this. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted people to appreciate the smaller nuances of the game, as opposed to just being, oh wow, 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 oh my god, what a shot. I mean, any sportscaster can do that. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
able to mix that in with the entertainment value and you break it down for, information about the game and the style and the basketball IQ, then at least I feel that you give the viewers a good package of the show, what they can enjoy watching. So that was that. I mean, so related to the question of staying ready, I mean, yeah, I never thought I'd be ready. I mean, when I was thrust into the PBA as an analyst at
Mm-hmm.
23, I'm like, am I really doing this? I was sitting beside Noli Ayala in my first game, and he was the Noli Ayala. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember it was Red Bull. I forget who it was against, whether it's Santa Lucia or something, but I'll never forget. It was even an overtime game, and
Mm-hmm.
Chris Bolado hit a running hook shot to send it to overtime, and Noli Ayala and I were jumping out of our seats, and like, oh my god, what I get? And then I was like, wow, what a baptism of fire. And
Mm-hmm.
then a few games after that, I did a game in Iloilo, as an out of town game. I think it was Pure Foods versus somebody else. I forget who it was. And I felt the rhythm of the game so well. And I felt I really did well. And I got a phone call right after that from the late Ronnie Nathaniels. And he said, you know what, Iho, you did so well. He's like, oh my God, I think you have a future in this thing. I'm like, really? Thank you. Kind words from you,
Mm-hmm.
sir. So it was right away. I got a boost of confidence from, the veterans who were there, who really helped me, from Noli Yala, Ed Pixon, and all the other
Yeah.
guys out there. And that helped a lot. But I guess I was ready in the sense that as a teenager, I would just watch the game also from an analytical point of view, because when I would watch the games on TV with my dad, we
Mm-hmm.
weren't much of the rah fans who would be in awe of the game. Rather,
Mm-hmm.
we'd break it down and he'd say, oh, look at this Sicocho, he substituted this guy in the fourth quarter, he's gonna match him up with that, whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I
Yeah.
talk a lot about that. And I realized I was doing a lot of analysis as much as early as a teenager already. And I
Mm-hmm.
just suddenly did it on television with a microphone in my mouth. So parang it just felt natural to me. So I'm grateful that I had that rhythm of just loving the game from that perspective.
Yeah, I could relate to that also. Like, especially to my teams, like, I'm for the Boston Celtics kasi,
Mhm.
and pag natatalo sila, like now this year, they're struggling. Like, I analyze the game, tapos parang ako yung, kala mo ako yung nagko-coach, tapos you want to put in the player na, and all these things. So that's how I watch kasi when it's my team, like, it's very intense. But then, yun nga, parang ina-analyze mo, paano nagpipick and roll yung kalaban, ba't hindi nagsiswitch yung, or bakit
Mhm.
hindi nagsishow yung big, yung mga ganun. That's why
Yep.
I like that way of also watching the game, even local hoops. That's also how I watch it. And when you compare it to the NBA style of play, but
Mhm.
then you mentioned that you were one of the youngest analysts in the PBA
Mhm.
in your time. So what were some growing pains that you had at that young age, and how did you? What was the process like in overcoming it? Since you mentioned that the late Ronnie Nathaniels even said that you were eventually doing really well already at that age.
Growing pains. I'm just, for one, I'm thankful there was no social media at the time, because I'm pretty sure Paolo and I would have been burned on social media by people saying, "Why the hell are these two guys there? Maybe because of their famous dads, Waka Trilli and Tommy Manotoc cut them the job, whatever."
Mhm.
Admittedly, so our famous dads got our foot in the door. It helped.
Yeah.
Yes, we can't deny that because who the hell are we if not for being the sons of our dads at that young age? We haven't accomplished anything. But to stay there, that's a different story because we
Mhm.
had a lot of other guys that came and went. That some had a connection with this and that, or some had, was recommended by this and that. But then after a few games, they were so horrible, they were gone. So the fact
Mhm.
that we survived and had a relatively successful career for a very long stretch means we really worked at our craft and we worked at what we had to do and learned the skills, the techniques, and the nuances of the game that we had as former varsity players ourselves. Although we were not UAP stars, but I honestly think I always tell this to my friends. I honestly think my time on the bench in LaSalle helped prepare me as well, be a better analyst because I was learning, sitting beside the coaches and understanding, hearing things like that. So that for me gave me a different perspective compared to when I was in Ateneos in high school where I played a lot of minutes, one of the leaders of our team, and then I had a
Mhm.
different perspective as a bench player, as a role player. So
Mhm.
I think that really prepared us a lot for the game's analysis. But in terms of growing pains, once in a while you hear murmurs here and there. Again, thankfully, walang social media na, may mga chismis-chismis, oh, nandiyan lang yan kasi anak niya ni ganyan, whatever. But then, I guess we let it, Pao and I were never talked about it, but I'm pretty sure he had the same mindset that we just let it fuel our desire and drive to be better and
Mhm.
prove them wrong. But more than proving them wrong, I'm always of this mindset of I just want to do the best I can rather than
Mhm.
having a negative motivation of I'm doing this because I have a chip on my shoulder. I want to prove them wrong. I want to focus positive and say I'm enjoying this. I'm doing the best I can, and I want to do this as a service for the fans who really enjoy what I do. And one thing I learned in terms of growing pains, one thing you learn quickly in any kind of TV work that you're out there is that you cannot please everybody. There will be people who will like you. There will be people
Mhm.
who will like, okay, I'm neutral, and there will be people who will hate you. That's just the
Mhm.
way of the world in anything you do. And I would liken it to an art form. If you're an artist, singer, composer, or you draw
Mhm.
art, whatever, there's just a segment of people who will love it, a segment of people who
Mhm.
will like, okay lang, and a segment of people like, oh, that's ugly. Ganun talaga eh.
Mhm.
So I've never encountered any sportscaster, whether in the US or the Philippines, and absolutely everybody would say, oh, I love this guy, he's the best.
Yeah.
Kahit pa paano, paunti-unti dyan na neutral lang, and meron ding, I don't like him.
Mhm.
It is what it is, and it's fine. Once you learn to accept that fact, then you're good. You won't worry so much about, oh, I gotta prove the haters wrong. Oh, I gotta learn to please the haters, whatever. Although you still have to take constructive criticism, well, and and and
Mhm.
and dissect it from what points they may have said that you may have missed. Oh, no, okay, yun. But take
Mhm.
the emotions away. Don't get driven by the emotion of because they didn't like you and whatever. You sound like a frog or whatever it is, right? So,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, that's a great trait that you have, and not all the people that cover sports actually have that. Like yung iba nakikipagsagutan rin sa social media, or
mhm,
like I don't know, like sometimes sila Kendrick Perkins, he argues with the players, like sila
mhm,
ni Draymond, and then when Draymond got the gold in the Tokyo Olympics, sabi niya, that's for you, Kendrick Perkins. Yung may mga ganun pa media barbs, like
yeah.
Skip Bayless also. But then for you, how do you do that na nababalance mo and nabibuild mo yung sarili mo na you are very like you know how to negate the negative criticism, and then you could absorb the positive criticism and make you yourself a better broadcaster or a host. So how do you dissect it nga and divide it in a way?
I think that's the nature of the person that I evolved into. This actually has a lot to do with me overcoming my anxiety and depression as a teenager and coming into
Mm-mm.
college, wherein I was able to figure out a way of life and a mindset that I would let go of pressure and stress, especially with academics. And the key to that was just acceptance of accepting there are a lot
Mm-mm.
of things in this world that you can't control. You know,
Mm-mm.
like for example, just break it down like grades. I can study the best I can for an exam, but I don't know what the questions will be. I don't know if it's going to be S
Yeah.
or whatever. So I'll do my best, but I can't fully control the grade I'm going to get because that's up to the teacher. So
Mm-hmm.
I never stress myself. Nah, I gotta get this grade. I gotta get this average. I'm like, it came to a point that I'm like, I'm gonna be here to learn and enjoy
Mhm.
this process of learning. And I realized slowly that I was able to learn to live a life relatively low stress because I let go of people's expectations of me. I let go of trying to match certain expectations and things that I don't have control over anyways. So I just stuck with what I could control, like nowadays, like my physical health, my mental health. Those are things I have full control over. Other things I'll still try to make an impact on with my work and the things I do in my relationships, but there's a limit I put to what I'll say that hanggang dyan yung stress level ko, and then paano na ang universe? Leave it up to faith and
Mhm.
God na rin. So I guess it relates to that, where I'm able to let go of criticism, of negativity and all that from certain people. And it's unfortunate. Well, you don't like me, then fine. You don't like what I said, then fine. That's what can I do? I can't change your mind, diba? So it is what it is. But you learn along the way. So yeah, given that, I mean that example of how some people would just try to actually fight them on social media, I think it's a waste of time. Sometimes I'll try to engage them in a you know calm way and say, what did you mean by that? Parang minsan nangaaway, oh, you're so biased. I'm like, what point of the game did you say ganyan, ganyan? And I really meant to like have a decent conversation with these people, so maybe I could pick up a thing or two. But more often than not, they don't come back to me because they can't even remember a single word that I said that sticks out. Na hindi kasi it was display that you said bias. I'm like, yun
Mhm.
yung hinahanap ko, parang wala naman pala. So they baka naman
Yeah.
sir emotional ka lang. So
Yeah.
I've lost count how many times I've even become friends with some haters when I've calmed them down. I'm like,
Mhm.
relax, buddy. Maybe you were just so high. No, yeah, you're right. You know what, Sir TJ? Sorry, we're getting it's hilarious. There's had numerous occasions on Twitter and in social media na may ganon na after the next day nagsosorry sila sa akin. Sorry po, grabe lang yung emotion ko nung kahapon kasi natalo yung team ko, tambak eh, whatever. So mga ganon. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm just able to let go of that stress because I've learned to accept there are things I can't control. And lalo na yung mga comments and emotions of viewers. So let them be.
Yeah, in connection to that, you mentioned nga that you were evolving and developing as well as a person when you were from a teenager and all the way now that you're an adult and you have a new job na rin. And as a broadcaster or as a person covering games, you need to also develop and grow lalo na pag may mga bagong players, may bagong tactics, schemes of coaches, yung mga ganun, madaming bagong way like now sa basketball nauso na yung three-point shot pero 10 years ago parang mortal sin pa mag three-point shot yung big man, yung mga ganun.
Mhm.
So you need to also evolve as a player that covers the sport. So for you, how do you do that? Like others maybe would read books or listen to podcasts and watch documentaries. How about for you? What's your strategy or tactic in terms of developing and improving?
Well, back then, I mean, before I had my retirement of sportscasting
Mm-hmm.
2018, I would, yeah, podcasts, I would watch, videos here and there. Not necessarily diving in hard into books and documentaries, but just keeping in the know with at least the sports shows, wherein you get to hear some really good analysis. Watching other analysts as well, especially here in the States, watching the guys who are really good that I look up to, at least like back then I really loved Steve Kerr when he was still analyzing games. Um, Even as far back as Bill Walton, he was one of my favorites too. Jeff
Mm-hmm.
Van Gundy, Mark Jackson, I love those guys. So yeah, it's just trying to pick up things from them and seeing how they appreciate the trends, how they appreciate how the game is evolving as well, and then seeing that kind of trickle down and translate to Philippine basketball as well and how it happens. So and also within my peers within Philippine, the world of Philippine sportscasting, how we all had evolved. A lot of new faces have come as well and younger guys. So I learned from them because a lot of them are more into the bookish stuff. A lot of them are more into the advanced analytics. So I pick up things from them as well. So just trying to be a sponge and trying to be open to learning a lot of new things. And I think the key to that was the mindset of always yearning to be better rather than saying, "Oh, I've been here for 10 years. I know everything." Anybody could easily have that mindset. Na magaling na ako. I've been here for so long. I can't. You can't teach me anything new. Yung mga ganun. It's possible to have that mindset, but thankfully, at least me and the people I'm around in ABC and sports back then, hindi kami ganon. we were all willing to learn from the changes in the game, changes in the way games are covered, with the advent of social media and the younger guys coming along. So we were all able to complement each other as a team. Few people see that that side of us behind the scenes, that we get together as a sportscasting team, once or twice within the season, to huddle together, and then even before games and in between games, we see each other in the arenas and we talk and we chat. So it's a nice group that had developed some pretty good camaraderie, and we're able to support each other a lot. And I like the fact that the production teams mix us up. Even though people know me and Boom well as the iconic Boom and TJ tandem, but I also worked a lot with Nico Halili. I worked a lot with Nico Ramos, and Boom also did games with Ronnie Magsanok and with Christian Luanzon. So it was a good mix of the people, and when you do that, that's when you're able to, so from a higher perspective, from a production perspective, you're able to develop those talents and to really mix and mash them, and you get different perspectives and unique attributes out of them depending who they match up with. So, like for example, with Miko, I'm funnier than when I am
Mm-hmm.
with Boom sometimes, or when I'm with Nico, it's a little different. We get I get to be more lively with him because he's one of the younger ones in the group, and we're
Yeah.
more hyper and hyped up, so I get to ride with him as well. So may mga ganon. I mean, hindi mo naman talaga siya, you don't really think hard about it. I'm gonna be this way, but you just ride with the flow. And a lot of the game really is carried by the anchor, by the play-by-play. So the best analysts out there really have their anchors to thank for making them look good and making the whole broadcast look good. So yeah, I'm fortunate I've had so many amazing, people. If people do like what I've done as an analyst, I would quickly deflect that and say, well, thank my anchors. They were amazing. Boom, Miko, Nico, Eric, and all them. They made me as well who I am today as an analyst. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's really great nga that you have also that way of covering games that really is pleasing also to the ear. Like, alam mo, there were some kasi na pag nagko-cover ng game na minsan pag exciting, sumisigaw lang sila ganun and wala na sila nga masyadong nasasabing
Mhm.
bits and pieces about the game or ina-analyze. But then for you, I think you're very methodical pa din when you are able to cover games. And I've had like Mix Bustos here, and he said nga he likes learning from you also on how you cover. And I think I hear also in Mikey Reyes in his YouTube channel, he also mentions you. So for you, you kasi you say that you're very passionate about sports ever since you were a kid, but then you still seem to be cool and calm when you are covering games, even if it's the exciting moment. So how do you do that? Like yung voice mo na modulate mo, or your emotions, you control it para your fans pa din, like they still are able to learn from you, and
Yeah.
they're still able to get what the knowledge and information you want to impart to them.
I guess nasasanay ka na rin. It's also a bit of presence of mind, knowing that you're there not just as a fan in the arena, but you're there to really be a different person from them, and being able to broadcast this game, bring the fun, the energy, but also the analysis and the information to the fans. Yeah, it's a matter of being present, presence of mind. It's not easy. As you said, anybody can easily get carried away, and they're just screaming with everybody. And we've seen some people, have fallen into the trap of getting too hyper and too excited to the game that they're just screaming.
Mm-hmm.
Wala silang
Yeah.
masabing creative, but
Yeah.
it's I guess you eventually develop it, that you're kind of numb to it. And one thing I don't like about it actually is sometimes I lose that ability to be a fan. Like sometimes I'm just there to watch. Let's say I'm gonna watch the first game before I do the
Mm-hmm.
second. And here I am. I want to enjoy the game. I'm like, God, my brain is just analyzing the game as opposed to wanting to, hey, yeah, wow, what a play or whatever. Parang juice out na yung pagka-fan ko in a
Mm-hmm.
way. So now I'm trying to bring that back more. Now that I'm kind of done, at least for now. Who knows if I
Mm-hmm.
go back, but I'm done for sportscasting for now. And I want to be a fan again when I get to go to the arenas, when I get to watch some games. So yeah, I guess you kind of develop that and you kind of get stuck in that. So it's a matter of just maintaining that and maintaining that mindset and presence of mind when you're doing the games.
Mm-hmm. And connection to that also, the Migs would also mention when I talked to him that he tried to get your style, like this your style in a certain way of covering the games, but it can't be like kumare solely like Jeff Van Gundy or
Mhm.
TJ Manotoc or
Yeah,
Mark Jackson. It needs to be like you develop your own, but not you can't just emulate one, because if you copy
absolutely.
someone, like it's pretty weird. It's not gonna sound correct when you're the one with the opportunity, but you sound like someone, or you're just trying to imitate someone 100%. So for you, how would you
Yeah.
describe your style in covering games, and what would you say, like what's your strengths or weaknesses maybe when you're covering any kind of UAP game?
I think I would really try to bring my personality to the game. People who know me, they're just like, just like you're there. It's just really you. You're not putting up a persona that's contrived, and trying hard to be this kind of on cam talent, but I'm not. So it's just one. It's just really being myself. Two, um, I do try to mix it up a lot in terms of the entertainment value and the information value of the game, wherein I don't hesitate cracking jokes with my partner,
Okay,
talking
yeah.
about food or current events or the current
Mm-hmm.
memes on the internet, the current jokes, whatever. And it depends on the game. Depends if it's a blowout and it's boring. You gotta find ways to be funny to keep
Yeah.
the viewers entertained. So may mga ganon, diskarte lang din. And also depende rin sa partner mo who you know that can take, can take those jokes. I remember
Mm-hmm.
before when Nico Ramos was new, when he transitioned from a court reporter to an anchor, he was telling me he was so nervous to be with me because he knows how I can be off the cuff and crack a lot of jokes. And so parang nag-worry siya na how he can be so serious. I'm like, dude, relax, chill, we got this. Parang may ganun siyang kaba na when
Mm-hmm.
he knew he was gonna work with me na parang you don't know what you're gonna get to this guy
Yeah.
sometimes. So, but he got a hang of it and he got to learn to enjoy my style in it. So, but I think I've been able to mesh a lot of influences in me, like I said. And but if there's one person I think that really sticks out that gave me the green light to be myself and to be natural and to maybe even crack jokes once in a while, I think it was Bill Walton. If you get to watch a
Mm-hmm.
lot of Bill Walton analysis back in the late '90s when he was still commentating in the NBA, that guy
Mm-hmm.
is funny. I mean, he
Yes.
still does college hoops now. I know,
Yeah, college. Yeah.
and but wow, he's hilarious, and I love watching Bill Walton. He can be funny this moment, and the next moment he's schooling you with the way this play was developed and how the coach did so well. So I love. It's a big Bill Walton fan. So if there's any influence really in me from anyone that had a heavy influence, but not naman copycat style, Bill Walton definitely is one of those guys. And then bits and pieces of others here and there. Just learn to absorb the way they see things, and even the way you kind of trend out a game wherein the game is progressing and then we're heading to the fourth quarter. So what are you looking for? What are the changes? What are the adjustments? What are the coaches, keeping in their back pocket to surprise other team, with matchups and set plays and whatnot. So things like that. So you're able to kind of predict how the game would flow, and then you know what gear to shift yourself into when that time comes. So even
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really great, and I hope that you're able to cover again in the future. You mentioned that you're not, I mean, like completely closing the door, and
definitely
uh,
not if as
um,
long as they keep the door open for me.
yeah, I mean, hopefully when ABS comes back, I mean, but then you up now is in Signal TV, so it's
I
gonna be
know, I
tough.
know.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but then hopefully, yeah, in the you never know in the future if
Yep.
whatever opportunity presents you, and hopefully you'll be able to, I'll be able to hear you again covering the games, because yeah, I miss
Thank
those
you.
times.
Not
Yeah,
there's
so
always the greatest games on YouTube or cable.
yeah, yeah,
Old
yeah.
classics. Yep.
Yeah. So for the next part of the interview, you mentioned, yeah, that you are a mental health advocate, and you like elaborating on your experience and teaching people on how to get go through all these tough times in their life, but then overcoming it and still continuing to live what they're supposed to do and their goals and achieving their goals. So to start things off, I'd want to ask, like, I don't remember if I watched the video, the one that trended on YouTube before in 2018. Not sure if I watched it before, but I watched it last night when I was like researching for the interview.
Okay.
So I'd want to ask, like, what was the process like, and constructing that video, and how long did it take, and for you to, because it's kind of difficult if you go through something like that and then you're
Yeah.
gonna put it on YouTube, so everyone's basically gonna hear what you went through. So
Yep.
how was
Yep.
it like for you? I mean, you were already an adult in that time, and it took many years before you actually published.
Correct. Well, it's a very serendipitous process of things that happened, that led me to that moment of wanting to do that. One of which was, I think it was around 2012 when on ANC, I was one of the anchors in ANC at the time, and our guest for the show was a woman named Jeannie Goldberg. She was launching at the time her foundation called the Natasha Goldberg Foundation, or NGF, and which is focused on suicide prevention and awareness for depression and mental health disorders. And literally 5 minutes into the interview, I started to talk about my experiences as well. And
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, our producers were like, "What's happening? This is supposed to be an interview." It became a conversation, and
Mm-hmm.
it came out well. The feedback was really good. That here was this newscaster, all of a sudden talking about his experiences going
Yeah.
through depression and anxiety as a teenager. Like, wow, that's rare for someone to admit it on live TV, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a revelation of sorts because I felt with the feedback I got, which was good, like, hey, wow, this is something I could talk about. Shortly after that, Jeannie, who's actually a family friend of my mom's, invited me to give a talk in Lasal, Dasmariñas, a few months down the line.
Oh.
So I was talking to a full gymnasium of kids and talking about my experiences, and the feedback was great. Kids went up to me and said, "Thank you for sharing my story." That just by hearing my story, they felt inspired and they felt motivated that they too can handle the challenges at the time. And I didn't realize that me telling my story could have an impact on others in
Mm-hmm.
terms of if they're going through something I went through as well. And then looking back to when I was, going through my roughest times as a teenager, I had a mentor who also was a wounded survivor. His name was Max Ricketts, and he was a man giving
Yeah.
free counseling in Santuario de San Antonio, Makati, and he survived manic depression during his time. And when I first met him, like, oh my God, you're alive, and I'm like, remember, this was in 1992 when I was going through mine, and I was like, there's no Google at the time, so there was nobody, very little information we could research. And when I met a man who I was told went through worse than I was, and I'm like, he's alive, okay, I have a chance, so he gave me hope. So fast forward back again to that day, those days in 2017, and I was turning 40 at that year, and I said, you know what? I think I want to gift the universe with something special when I turn 40. And that was telling my story. Because I said I wanted to be what Max was to me, to at least whoever on the internet. If I put this story online and if somebody watches this and they see it, this is what he went through and he survived, maybe it could give them hope and inspiration that they too can survive it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the reason why I did it. Even though there was a risk in terms of, being so raw and authentic and vulnerable, telling my story, and people may judge me, this and that, but I was like, you know what? I'm okay naman now. So okay lang. I mean, if they see that as my past and that's what I went through, that so be it. But at least I felt that it was important for survivors to come out. Because if you look at the time, if you look at other conditions, there's like AIDS, there's Magic Johnson, cancer,
Mm-hmm.
cancer survivors. And ang daming icons who are survivors for other conditions na people get to look up to. But if you
Oh.
look at mental health at the time, the famous names you think of are those who commit suicide. I'm like, why is
Mm-hmm.
that always the conversation that when it's a topic of mental health, the names that pop up are those who lost their lives because they were at the end of the rope and they had very little help and they gave up. So I
Mm-hmm.
felt as a journalist, even it's time to pivot the conversation and say, hey, let's talk about the survivors.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, there's more of us than those who
Yeah.
unfortunately didn't have enough support and ended up giving up. But there's many more of us who are thriving and are well, but they're ashamed to talk about it because there's a stigma. So I felt
Mm-hmm.
this is my opportunity to help fight that stigma, and it did. I'm thankful there was a good response, and others have come out as well. And even in the sporting world, in basketball world specifically, Tony De La Cruz is one guy who I know has come
Yeah.
out to be very vocal about his experience of his challenges as well and his depression, and I really salute that guy for being so detailed in his essay and the way he's talked about it in interviews. And I think it's important because when you're able to detail it very well, because all the more people can latch onto it and relate, as opposed to just saying, I'm well now, I went through it before, and da da da, parang bitin.
Mm-hmm.
Pero if you take them, this is why I felt that I had to do it that way. If you take them on a visual and emotional journey, they latch onto the story and they feel that inspiration, like it has an impact. So I'm thankful it did that. And I've heard from countless people who thank me just by watching the video. It inspired them a lot. So I'm like, wow, it's mind-boggling to think that a video could do that to some people, right? And set them on the
Mm.
path to wellness and seek help or open up to their parents or open up to a guidance counselor or whatever it may be. So I'm just blessed that I had that opportunity to to be an instrument, so to speak, no, and be one of those people who kind of push that conversation in that direction in terms of mental health in the Philippines.
Yeah, and I heard that you mentioned a while ago about what do you call this? You having help with the guy named Max, and Filipino culture for me could have an effect. I think I saw an article last night. I forgot who wrote it. It's about you also, the experience that you went through, and in the Filipino culture, baka hindi masyadong knowledgeable pa about mental health ng time na yon,
Yeah,
or Filipinos are afraid to admit it nga because people might say that they're weak, or because people just know physical pain, like mental pain baka nung 80s or 90s. They're not ngayon lang nagiging knowledgeable yung mga tao with the
yeah,
people going through it, lalo na
yeah.
like yung mga celebrities din nga, like you mentioned. And for you, how would you discuss like how Filipino culture could also be a reason on how people were afraid or maybe hesitant to open up before you and a few others started gave like the path for people to do so?
For sure. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with parenting. Unfortunately, I think mindset and method of parenting needs to evolve. There's a lot of parents out there who are still they're the ones who are afraid of the stigma mostly because nahihiya sila to tell people that their child might be going through this and that. Through the year of my research doing my video project between 2017 2018, I met a lot of people who told me that they couldn't even have the guts to tell their parents. Those who did tell their parents said, wala yan, di totoo yung depression yung
Yeah,
magpaka ng loob. So I'm like, wow, may ganun pala. I mean, I've heard of it, but it's my first time to hear these stories firsthand from
firsthand. Yeah.
people who had these kinds of parents. I'm like, I didn't realize it was like that because back then I had my mom and she was so supportive. I ran to my mom right
Mm-hmm.
away and she was my number one supporter from the get go. And then here I'm meeting people who were afraid to bring it up to their parents, those who brought it up to their parents and they were shunned and they were dismissed. And like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize it was that bad of a situation. So that's something, and then actually after my video came out, I heard from some people that they use my video as an icebreaker for their parents. I'm like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
glad that it could be used in that way too. So I think that's one big hurdle in terms of at least for the youth, for the younger generation when they go through mental health challenges. The parents are a big challenge. Another is school as well and culture in schools. But thankfully now more and more schools are more open to discussing these issues in school. The more that you talk about it, you lessen that stigma. Like my high school alma mater Ateneo, I'm glad that they've even highlighted it every year, and they have a mental health week or mental health awareness week, and I've guested there, given talks there, and I'm glad they're taking a proactive stance on it. So yeah, it's for me that's those are the biggest challenges now in the situation in the Philippines, especially with the younger generation. Social media as well. Social media plays a big role in it. If you were aware of the big news that Facebook and Instagram were in the last few weeks before December, they're being investigated by the U.S. Congress in terms of their role in the rise of depression and suicide amongst teenagers. So it's really now being scrutinized as well as playing a factor at the very least in terms of affecting people's mental health and wellness. So there's a bunch of factors out there, but I think the biggest ones I think that need to take a strong look in the mirror and evaluate the kind of impact that their old school values and attitudes have. I think it's parents and schools. And once they acknowledge that and they know that there's some things that need to be done and to change and to have hard conversations with the community, then I think we'll take a big step in terms of helping a lot of kids, ease up from their stresses and pressures and lessen, these incidences of depression and anxiety early on. Because for me, my advocacy has pivoted now to prevention, understanding where the triggers are, whether it's parents, school, academe, social media. Other people want to focus on getting people help, which is great. That's first aid. Finding more counseling and all this and that. Ako naman, I want to focus more on that side of the conversation we're in. Where is this coming from? Not everybody is getting it because they have a chemical imbalance. A lot of cases are coming out because of societal triggers,
Mm-hmm.
and those are, for me, um, avoidable if we can figure it out. Diba? If we can figure out what these triggers are, and maybe changes can happen within that culture.
Yeah. You mentioned when you did your research for the video that it's been a rapid increase of people that are having depression in 2017 and 2018 when you
Mhm.
did the video. But then I'm curious also, what's your opinion on, since it's been increasing, do you think people were actually experiencing the same pains in the 80s or 90s and they just weren't revealing it? Or is it really increasing now in like the 2000s and the 2010s because of social media and either other societal factors? Or what's your thoughts on that? Or is it a mix of both?
I think there really is more now, and I
Mm-hmm.
think really do think that culture and social media has played a huge role. I've read a lot of research on it as well from some journalists, and then there's a book called for those who want to dive deep in this. The book is called The Lost Connections by a British journalist called named Johan Hari, and he really dug up a lot of it, fascinating research on how for him there were seven major factors that really contributed to a lot of rise in cases of depression and anxiety. Social media was one of them, was a big part of it, and others were just parang ang point niya, when you look at the balance of someone's life, ang daming disconnect. Whether
Mm-hmm.
it's healthy relationship with your work, healthy relationship with your community, healthy
Mm-hmm.
relationship with nature, which we're meant to be living in, aside from just living in a box, in a condominium or a car, things like that. And parang dun niya nakita yung gaps in a lot of people that had fallen into the triggers and gone into those downward spirals of depression and anxiety. So yeah, for me, my straight answer that I think there's more now in the 90s and the
Mm-hmm.
2000s, because of a lot of triggers nowadays with social media and culture and pop culture and all that, with what's been going on and how society has become, I think, a little bit more parang, I'm trying to look for the right word, comparing, parang there's this social comparison anxiety wherein you have your Instagram feed and you're looking at this celebrity and they have that lifestyle. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
They're in Anilaw again, and I've never even been to Palawan or things like that. So you may not think it, at the top of your mind, but these get planted as seeds in your subconscious, and they do kind of eat into you if that's what you kind of think. So, and back in the year, 2000s, sorry, in the 1980s, wala namang ganun eh. People never
Mm-hmm.
printed out their photos and said, hey, look at my beach trip in Boracay. How lucky
Mm-hmm.
I am. And you're not. So, wala
Mm-hmm.
namang ganun back then. So, but it happens now. So it's there. It eats into people. So for me, what advice I would usually give to people is, have a good social media diet. Know when you're feeling the pressures, and turn it off. Turn off your phone. Get out. Enjoy some nature. Connect with real friends in person. And all I know the pandemic is
Yeah.
challenging us now with that, but
Yeah.
when you can do that, because a lot of these relationships that are just stuck on social media are kind of superficial. So if you're able to foster again real relationships in person, please do so, because that for me, it's how humans are meant to live, with real friends, real relationships in real life, IRL, in real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned the massive importance of in real life companions like your family and your best friends, your real close friends. And you said in earlier in your when you were sharing your experience that your mother was there during the whole time that you were experiencing it. So how would you explain the importance and the value of a great support system for the whole duration of your life? Because even some of my guests, the athletes, like nahirapan din sila dahil sa support system, or thankful sila dahil sa support system nila that they had a great education pa din, and kahit they were focused on playing basketball, their parents would put them in a great school and teach them the right values at home, and which they realized that helped them now that they're young adult already or an adult already. So for
Mhm.
you, how would you describe how much it helped you and how thankful you were also for the great support system you had all throughout the process?
Oh yeah, it was massive. I mean, the support I had from my mom, Max Ricketts, my therapist, Fred Uriarte, and people around us was really big. Even in my sporting life, I had my friends, my coaches. I wouldn't be here without them. Um, and that's just honestly that's how I feel the world is also. I mean that's also heavily discussed in that book I mentioned, The Lost Connections. That if you think about it, back in history, humans were meant to live in tribes. We were never meant to live solo as an individual and do your thing. Bahala ka mag-isa ka. But when you're in a tribe, everybody plays their role. There's the hunter, there's the grandmother, there's the cook, there's the healer, there's again. And so there's all this interconnectedness within that tribe that you kind of support each other and you're never alone. So it's fascinating to realize that oh, no, that's how I really feel. That's how humans are meant to be. But now that there's so much focus on individualism and go getting and career getting and whatever, parang this generation nawawala yung connection to that tribe and that group, and they're all just me 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 me. I want to get this, I want to get that. So they're losing the quality of the relationship. So for me, that support system is massive, and when you say support system, also you're not just taking, but you're giving. When you're part of something that's reciprocal and you're giving and helping out, and I know I've met so many people who have felt so much better with their mental health challenges when they started helping people as well. Parang yung pala yung magic na hindi lang ako help me, help me, help me, but they're like, how can I volunteer? How can I help you as well? So when they felt that reciprocity, then they felt that balance. Like, okay to, I'm nakakatulong pala ako. And, it gives them purpose. Sometimes a lot of people feel so empty and lost because they feel they have the lack of purpose. Diba? Like, nobody loves me, what am I here for? And they get in that downward spiral. But when they start to discover what they're good at and then maybe can help people with what they're doing with that, then they feel that sense of purpose. And when you're on that path, I think you're good. When you realize what your purpose is for life, or at least for a chapter in your life, you're blessed. You're really blessed to find your purpose. And I was always so fortunate. I've always, throughout my 20-year broadcasting career, I'll always pray to God and say, thank you for all the blessings. Thank you that I'm able to do something I'm so passionate in. And I feel it's my purpose and I'm able to do this as a job. So
Mm-hmm.
very few people are able to live out their dreams and do that. And I wish that for everybody. And for young people like you, this is, the advice that I usually give when people ask me that. And I'm like, say, hey, you know what? Do away with the traditional definition of success. Some parents are so old school na anak, you have to be successful. So maging lawyer ka or maging doctor ka, whatever. My apologies to the old school parents like that, but that sometimes you may be driving your children to difficult path because that's not what they want to be. That's not what they're
Mm-hmm.
meant to be. They want to be a lawyer. Just because
Mm-hmm.
everybody in the family is a lawyer, they have to be a lawyer again. No, I mean, what if they're meant to be an artist? What if they're meant to be a musician? What if they're meant to be, an athlete? So it's a matter of setting your preferences of your lifestyle. You may be an artist, but you probably won't afford a house in Alabang right away,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. But level your lifestyle and your expectations. But at least what you do on a daily basis, you love it. You enjoy the grind. Whether it's being
Mm-hmm.
a basketball player or a basketball coach, even for a high school, doesn't pay great, but you love what you do. You're good. You're way better than the guy who's in an office in Makati as an accountant, but he hates it. He hates numbers, but he's there because his parents told him accounting will make him successful and rich. So who's better off, right? So for me, the numbers game is not how you define life. It's ironic as sports is about all about numbers. There's winners and losers, there's advanced stats, but in real life, it's not about the numbers. It's about the heart of what you do. And what you love doing and how you what you do, makes an impact in other people's lives, and then you're good. For me, that's the key to that's success for me.
Yeah, that's really great. And as the world evolves, people really are being more open. Like parents are being more open to give their child or children like more opportunities and
Yeah,
follow and listen to them as well. So parang
thankfully.
two-way communication na like choosing your course in college and the
Yep.
job you'd want to pursue in the future. So I think it's a slow, progression pero gradual pa din na nagkakaroon na ng progress here in the here in the country, at least here in the
Mhm.
Philippines. But then for you, I'd want to ask, like, for some people kasi medyo like grade conscious din sila, and you mentioned nga in your video that that was the tough time for you and then Ateneo nung you were just focused on studying too much, but you weren't doing other stuff anymore, like, I don't know, maybe socializing or playing around outside with your classmates and friends. So how would you tell people na ma-balance yun in terms of being a young kid? Kasi syempre, hindi pa sila mature kung high school, grade school, that time of their life yet.
Yeah.
So, and people would wanna, be excellent, like, ikaw yung pinakamataas na grades. So, what was your
Mhm.
advice for people, and what should they look out for then at that age?
Well, for me, my message would be is focus on learning. I mean, if the good grades come and the honors come, great. That's a bonus. Pero I shy away from advising people to make that the goal. Now I have to be an honor student. I have to be top 10 again. I have to be on that board. Um, because if that is what you define yourself and define your life, what if, for example, I mean, I've heard of horror stories about this. That this guy is like a top honor student all his life, and then he suddenly goes to this high school where it's even more challenging, more competitive, and he's never top 10 anymore. And then he's
Mm-hmm.
just so down and depressed because he was so used to being top 10 in his grade school, and then all of a sudden high school, parang bakit na? And his parents would get mad at him. Ano ka na? Nabobo ka na ba? I mean, what's
Mm-hmm.
happening? So for me, that's not the barometer of someone's life. That you're
Yeah.
based on grades, and then I give that advice too. That when I was in college, I said to myself, I'm not going to let my life be judged by a piece of paper and a number on the piece of paper for my life because that's not going to define me. I mean, it may define my situation right now. That's what I know about this particular subject, but it's not going to define me forever. And I've realized a lot of late bloomers in life when in terms of learning and education. Me now, I love to learn. I love to read and watch things that I can learn from. I wasn't of this mindset when I was in my late teens and my 20s. So we have our own pace of evolving and learning. Um, so so yeah, and so my general advice would be is just do your best to be there and be participative and learn. If the honors and the grades come, that's great. But don't let that define you. And don't hang on to it as life and death as well. Diba? I mean, if it's there, it's there. If it's not, then look back on where you made mistakes in your exams or your quizzes or whatever. Be technical about it as opposed to drowning in that number or lack of a certificate and then I'm not honors. In fact, I rarely post stuff kind of personal and emotional on social media, but I did this in March of this year, wherein it was graduating season in the Philippines, and I said,
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm seeing a lot of my friends and my peers who are parents, posting photos of their kids graduating with honors, with medals, and all this. I'm like, that's all great. Congratulations. But this message is not for you. Sabi ko, this message is for those who were like me, who barely made it, who were flunking, who flunked out, or who are not even
Mm-hmm.
graduating, because there's actually more of us than there is
Mm-hmm.
of them. Kasi yung
Mm-hmm.
honors ko, konti lang in the proportion
Yeah.
of society, but there's most of us who are normal, average, and failing. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
don't be discouraged. This does not, your current grades don't define your life now. It's never going to define your life forever. Because look at me, I was that in college, and I was in high school. I was like an average student in Ateneo. I barely survived, and I'm relatively, for people seeing my career, they would call this career successful now. So I'm okay. So it never defines you. It's never an end game. Yeah, you'll graduate, you'll finish your schooling in a certain year, but it doesn't really end. Learning never ends, and in fact, it's falling into a big trap if you think learning ends when you graduate, because you have to keep learning in your career, for your work, learning as a human being, for being a better person in your relationships with friends, with your spouse, as a parent, all that. There's so much learning to happen in this life. So for that, it's really just focusing on growth and learning, and rather than the accolades here and there. So I hope parents feel the same way too. Unfortunately, a lot of the pressure does come from parents. Sometimes it comes from the kids themselves, that they want to be so competitive that they just want these darn good grades and all this and that. I mean, yeah, it'll give you a head start in life. It'll, for the high school kids, yes, I understand it's going to get you into a better school or a good school, but
Mm-hmm.
whatever's meant for you is meant for you, as long as you're true to yourself. You do your best to learn. Don't kill yourself and pressure yourself for a particular number. um and you'll get there. I mean, and even in college, for those who were in college during my time, they were pressuring themselves to have such good grades because they felt the honor graduates will be, plucked earlier by these big corporations. And it's true, you get a head start.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't guarantee success. It doesn't guarantee you'll last long.
Yeah, yeah. It's
And in
only the
fact,
start. Yeah.
yeah, in fact,
Yeah.
most HR departments now in big companies, they rather look beyond the grades and the transcripts. They look at the personality. They look at the
Mm-hmm.
character. They look at the person that is beyond the piece of paper and say, "What kind of person are you? Are you willing to
Mm-hmm.
learn? Are you good? Are you a good teammate? Are you
Mm-hmm.
trainable? All this and that." Because the skills we learn in school, very little of it really brings its value in the workplace. A lot of the skills we do in our jobs were learned in the workplace. Diba? So it's really learning how to learn. That's the key. If you
Mm-hmm.
get to impress your bosses and your HR interviewee, that you tell them, I'm a good learner. I'm a
Yeah.
great team. I learn well, and I love to learn. They'll be like, wow, you're a guy we want on our team. Believe me.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it works nowadays.
Yeah, that's a really integral factor in progressing in this world. Like there's
Mhm.
new things coming up every year, so if you
Yep.
keep learning, it's really great. But I want to touch on the part of the COVID-19, and you mentioned like new challenges, continuous progression is really integral. But like now in the COVID-19 pandemic, more people were sad because they don't get to see their friends and family. They'll be at their houses, and even in school and academics, it's kind of hard to learn. Like you mentioned,
Mhm.
learning is the
Yeah.
focus. Like people aren't as focused now because what they'd watch like TV or they'd play video games during class. So hindi nila na-absorb yung knowledge na bibigay sa kanila through Zoom or Google Meet or other forms of learning. So for you, how would you describe like the enormous hurdles, I guess, of the COVID-19 pandemic on the mental health of people, and what new things did would you suggest or you suggested when you speak in other events? I mean, to how to become, have a better mental health here in the whole COVID-19 pandemic, since it's not done yet, also.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for that. I mean, well,
Mm-hmm.
it actually, when I've given talks, I've had a sporty acronym for this, and I call it GAME,
Mm-hmm.
GAME. And this, I really just evolved into this during the pandemic, early on 20 the pandemic started 2020. Okay, April 2020. um,
Mm-hmm.
G starts for gratitude, and I learned this mental hack and skill as early as 2018, I think 2017, that I think I encountered a podcast interviewing Tony Robbins. If you're familiar with Tony
Okay.
Robbins, is this this success coach, and talks about his morning routine. And one of the things he does in his morning routine is he has a gratitude journal, and he writes down the things he's grateful for. And learning more and reading more into it, and I was encountering a lot of articles that there was research by Harvard, by Stanford, and whatnot, and they were researching people who were executives and professionals who were doing these things, that their productivity, focus, and happiness just were going up and up and up, partly because of having a gratitude practice. And it's as simple as really just answering a question of what are you grateful for today? What are the three things you're
Mm-hmm.
grateful for today? And so I started that as a regular practice as well, and it just worked wonders for me in terms of my mental health and wellness and stability. Second would be acceptance, and I've mentioned this a bit already earlier in terms of
Yeah.
just having that mindset of acceptance and knowing that there's a border for my stress levels. That there's some things I can't control. That's okay. I'll leave that to the universe, and I'll focus on things I can control. And back then, it was my physical health. I was gaining a bit of weight. Medyo nagkakadad bod ako because of the pandemic, so I wanted to be healthier. Started exercising again, starting to go back on my nutrition plan, and it was down. I was able to, successfully do that. M is mindfulness and meditation, actually. So I started to meditate as well more regularly starting last year. And there's various ways to do it. When I was a kid, I was exposed to some really challenging ones. Like my mom would bring me to a Zen meditation class. Okay, like the ones that
Mm-hmm.
Phil Jackson would do. And like, it's like that's
Yeah.
hard for a teenager to sit down and be quiet for an hour. And that was one of the things that my mom was trying to make me do. So nowadays, ang daming iba. I mean, there's like simple guided meditations. There's so many apps out there. There's an app, if you may have seen this, the app Calm is a meditation app, and guess who their lead endorser is? A guy named LeBron James. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's no secret anymore that the most, you know, successful people in this world, the high performers in sports, entrepreneurship, and whatnot are doing these things. And like, let's get a clue, man. I mean, they're happy and successful and productive, and this is what they're doing. It's some people may be turned off like, oh my god, it's so hipster, meditation and gratitude. But believe me, it's such basic life skills that apparently can fuel us to be superhumans. So that's one thing. So the meditation and the mindfulness, if you can find a way to be mindful and meditative, try it out and see what it can do for you. And the last letter E is just evolve. And I've mentioned this, in time and again within the last hour we've been talking. It's just that willingness to evolve, never settling to be who you are. Even in sports, just never settle. You never settle. Always working harder the next day, like Kobe. I want to work harder to be better myself. I will never be complacent at the level of skill I have in this sport. But as a big picture, never be complacent in who you are in your life in terms of your aspects of your life, whether it's your physical health, your mental health, your who you are in your relationship with your friends or your parents or your siblings or your spouse, that you can find ways to be a better version of yourself. Maybe be more patient, maybe be more generous, maybe be more forgiving. And damning aspects of life where you can break it
Mhm.
down and see maybe I can be a little bit better. So that for me is game. So it's gratitude, acceptance, meditation, mindfulness, evolve. So those are the tips that I've learned to develop the last year and a half that I'm grateful I did, and I'm able to share this to people who want to be mentally well, mentally tougher, mentally more balanced. And I think that if people are able to practice these skills consistently, they'll be better off, and they'll be able to fend off these stress and triggers. Yes, life will happen, breakups will happen, people will die in your life. You may lose a job. You may your businesses may go up and down, whatever. But the resiliency is built within you if you're able to keep yourself stable. For me, I was able to put it to a supreme road test. ABS-CBN was shut down months later when I started these things. And when
Mhm.
it was shut down, we were all in tears and crying and angry. But I was shocked because if anything, if there was any moment in my life that probably could have and should have triggered another anxiety episode in me since my in my early 20s, that should have been it. Going
Yeah.
through that horror of watching the ABC been shut down. But it didn't. And I was focused and I was stable. I was angry and sad and crying, but I was in control.
Mhm.
I was telling my wife and my sister, you know what? Wow, I think this all this meditation and journaling has helped me a lot in terms of being in control. So I was
Mhm.
able to put it to a really supreme road test, and now I'm a living proof that this stuff works, man. So it can really put you in a great, you know, zone and center. And if there's one last bit of advice I can give that means a lot to sports fans, my favorite moment of um, the Last Dance with Michael Jordan was not probably the favorite moment of a lot of people. It is when his biographer, the author of his book, I forget his name right now, said in an interview that Michael Jordan's biggest or best gift is not his athletic ability. His
Mhm.
superpower is his ability to be present in everything that he does. Whether it's on the court practicing, whether it's in a meeting with you, whether it's in an interview, whether it's spending time with his kids, whatever, he's always present and focused. Especially in the world that we live in nowadays, there's so much distractions from our
Mhm.
phones, social media, and just worrying about tomorrow, regretting what you did yesterday. It's so difficult to be here now and present. And maybe this gift was given to him by Phil Jackson as a Zen master and coach, mentor. Maybe I don't know where he developed
Mhm.
it, but he was good at it, and that's what the
Mhm.
guy said was, "This is his superpower. He's such a mentally strong human being that he can be so present every moment in everything he does. And that's why he's so successful in what he was able to do." And for me, that was a major wow moment. Like, oh my god, wow! I'm thankful I pulled this nugget out of that episode, out of the 10 episodes, out of so many things that happened in the documentary. I'm loving this moment, and I'm grateful I can share it to sports fans alike to have that
Mhm.
perspective on the mind, on the human, capacity. That if we are just stronger in being present in everything we do, we can be better in everything we do. So yeah.
Yeah. And there's one thing that I like also. Like you mentioned that the support system na kanina and like Michael Jordan being present there. So one aspect that's important for people going through a lot also, or if they reach out to you for help, or if they want to share a story in their life, magkikwento sila. It's listening. Like how would you explain the value of listening, especially like for people that are going through a lot. Like sometimes kahit di ka nga magsalita, like they just know you're
Oh yeah,
present there. Like you know what Michael Jordan said
yeah,
nga in The Last Dance,
super.
that he was present in every moment. And sometimes kasi like if you're in a certain event, you're there physically, but then your mind's wandering around and thinking about like the game that's occurring in
Mhm.
Araneta or something. So medyo hindi ka nakikinig sa nangyayari, or pag kinakausap ka, you're not really absorbing what the person's telling you. So how would you explain and how would you value the importance of listening, not only for people going through depression or anxiety, but like in general, because sometimes that's where people appreciate like that you're there for them and that you're listening to them when they're telling you their story or what went through their day, or yeah, that's if they're struggling about certain things in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what was one meaning of being present. Just being present is also being there to listen, right? And to really be
Mm-hmm.
engaged listening. And when it's somebody saying things that they're sad about or struggling, it's being compassionate and empathetic and
Mm-hmm.
sympathetic with them. Non-judgmental. You're not a trained professional, so you're not there to solve their problems. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so just be there for them, be a shoulder to cry on if that's what's happening at the moment, or if it's other things in life that we just need to be more present and listen and really be attentive to what's going on around us. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of cool things nowadays. Like I remember I was in a, I think it was a uh what's this chat this chat app Clubhouse. There's a discussion on mental wellness and all this, and then one of these guys said that what he does with his friends when they're out on dinner, they swap phones. Like, here's my phone, I'll take your phone, put it
Yeah.
aside. So it takes away the distraction, and we're here together, we're present. Because if usually what happens when we eat, we pull out our phones and we put it
Mm-hmm.
in front of us, and later you're all like scrolling, and then you're kind of ignoring each other. There are moments that are lull that you're kind of all ignoring each other. But that was a cool hack, cool technique. Now, okay, let's swap phones. So at least the phone will still be there in case of an emergency that it
Mm-hmm.
rings, right? But if not, at least there's nobody picking up, checking messages and email and social media. So you're present. So there are many ways around it. I mean, even if it's like you're attentive in class and whatnot, or just taking down notes once in a while also I think helps a lot. I mean, I was never the kind to be all in on the notes to everything the teacher would write and say. I was writing it down. I would take down significant parts of it, and then I would
Mm-hmm.
photocopy the notes from the studios guy next to me.
Yeah.
So I get everything back. But
Yeah.
that was my hack. But really just jotting down notes on certain things that are important. So even if you're reading a book or listening to a podcast, jot down those memorable moments, and that helps you be present and helps you listen well as well. It helps you remember it because there's cognitive magic to writing down things that you're hearing and learning. I can't explain, but it's been proven in so much studies that there's something about writing things down and there's magic in it. So do that, and I think you'll be able to listen better and to absorb better, whether it's listening to a friend, listening to a podcast, listening something to a lecture of a class. So that's a cool perspective, and it's a very mature thing for you to think of for your age, Jago. So kudos to you for that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And as we wind down to the final portion of the interview, I want to thank you again, TJ, for sharing your experience and giving a ton of advice. Even if you've done it, I'm pretty sure like 1,000 times already. It's a great way for my listeners or the people listening to this podcast to learn more about your story, and for them to know nga na some people might be going through the same thing, but they just haven't opened up. But then through you, they'll be able to go through that. They'll be able to open up na. But then for the last portion of the interviews, these are just fun questions that I'd want to ask. So one of it is, what's your favorite game, or what's the most memorable game or games that you've covered in your whole like broadcasting career? Not necessarily for the result of the game. Maybe something happened off cam that happened. I don't know anything for you.
Well, funny enough, it's not basketball. I think the most awesome game that I was part of and I covered was the Azkals when they beat North Korea. I mean, that was at that time was the highest ranked team that we ever beat. And they were down 2-0 or 2-0 in that game, and they came
Two,
back with 3-2 in stunning comeback fashion. And I was so blessed to be the anchor for that game, and it's just so memorable. I'm thankful that it's on YouTube and it's gonna be there forever. I can show my kids and my grandkids. So
mm-hmm.
that's one of the most memorable. Basketball, the man. I'd say Um, I think when the Cavs beat the Warriors in the finals, when it was just so improbable that they were down 3-1, right?
Yeah.
That was incredible to be a part of and to see. Um, UAP, just too many incredible moments to count. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. And then in the Sea Games, actually, I was there. I covered a bunch of Sea Games, but the most memorable for me was when my own son. My son was part of the archery team, and he won. They won gold in
Wow.
Indonesia. So it was
Mhm.
also a come from behind win. So it was pretty cool to see them win, and I was there to cover it as the reporter, but I was also his dad. So it was
Mhm.
really awesome to be there. So a bunch of memorable, for sure, memorable sporting moments that I'll never forget. And I'm grateful that it's in my memory bank. I'm grateful it's in my phone photo memories because when the
Mhm.
memory fades away, at least I can look back there. But yeah, so it's those are
Yeah.
things that you live to look back on with a smile and say that was awesome.
How about if you have an opportunity to have dinner with five people, dead or alive, who would you bring to the dinner?
Really, five people dead alive. Okay, definitely want to be Steve Jobs. Number two would be Kobe. Uh, and then maybe Michael Jordan. Phil Jackson would be the fourth,
Mhm.
and then the fifth would be. Ooh, hmm, that's tough. I'm running out here. Hmm, maybe. Man, Seal. It's one of my favorite singers. It's his back in the '90s, and his
Oh,
music was incredible. So would love to learn more about how he put his music together. That's my five.
yeah. How about for the final question? And you know that I invite people to the DVD show through social media or their email. I don't really have that much connections in the sporting world. So who would you suggest to for me to guest here on the DVD show? I mean, I've mentioned that I've guested a lot of people already,
Mhm.
like players, media personnel, and coaches. So who do you think would have a great story to tell, also, or anyone that you could suggest?
Well, if you could get Heidelin Diaz, that'd be incredible.
Oh yeah,
Um, I don't know if you've already guessed it, Tony De La Cruz.
not
His
yet.
story is great. So yeah, he'd be great to guest. Who else? But as you said, you're not just basketball, but you want
Mm-hmm.
to try other sports. So ang dami diyan. Madami ka pa mahuhugot na ibang magaling na kwento from other sports as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, from billiards, Rubilin Amit is a great interview.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember.
She's cool. She's one of the best billiards players we've had ever. Hmm. Noli Iyala would be fun too because he's had the
Mm-hmm.
perspective from a sports caster to the league commissioner to running a basketball team's program at San Miguel and then now kind of back to being sportscaster. So he's had a fun journey too. Yeah, those guys top of mind would be. I'm sure you'd have fun interviewing and probably
Yeah,
Kinito Henson. Have you interviewed Kinito Henson?
yeah. He was one of my first
There you
guests. Yeah,
go.
he's the best. And also for LaSalle, and I interviewed them also recently about boxing because of the Olympics. They were successful and
Very good.
talked about boxing culture in the Philippines.
Oh, how about Aaron Ataide?
Not yet. I haven't
He's
interviewed
he's
him.
he's now in ESPN, man. The ESPN.
Yeah.
So he was one of our guys in UAP, and then became an anchor, and then moved to the PBA, and then now he's in Connecticut in the
Yeah, he
ESPN.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I'm so happy for him.
Yeah, I should actually interview. I could try. Like Heidelin's pretty difficult. Like I keep just following up, and hopefully they reply soon. And the others I haven't tried. Or yeah, I haven't tried. I think the others that you suggested. So hopefully I'll be able to.
Trying to shoot your shot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I do. And then sometimes they don't see it. I just follow up because you never know. They might see it the
Yep.
second or the
Exactly.
third time. So
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So yeah, thank you again, TJ, for
Hey,
joining me
you're
here on
welcome.
the DVD show. I really appreciate the time and the stories that you told. And do you have any final message before you go?
Well, when is this? Are you publishing this right away?
No, I do my episodes every Wednesday.
Okay, so this is coming out New Year, end of the
Yeah,
year.
mga Jan. Because I have an episode today
Got it.
and this week na and the next
Well,
week. Yeah.
Since you're watching this January, Happy New Year to everybody out there watching. Wishing you all a healthy, happy, and good wellness in 2022 for yourself, your family, our country. Hopefully, we figure things out. But as you've heard in this discussion so far, just continue to do what you love, enjoy. As me and Diego were one of millions of sports fans all over the world, blessed with sports that makes us happy as sports fans. I hope you find your happiness too, whatever it is in the world. Then keep at it. So thank you and God bless.
Okay, thank you so much again. Is it okay if we take a picture before you
Or
go?
yep.
Okay, I'll take it from here. One, two, three. Okay, thank you so
All
much
right.
again, TJ, for
You're
joining
welcome.
me, and stay safe out there. Bye bye.